Avid partner and have had countless years of successful relationships, installs, and projects together. Avid is really the tops of what they do, and Bob Russo, who's a senior principal product designer and has been with Avid for over 10 years, is going to review how to get the most out of Avid's shared storage systems. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and pass it over to Bob.
All right, thank you very much. So again, yes, I'll introduce myself. I'm Bob Russo. I'm the product designer for shared storage here at Avid Technology, and I'm going to try to take questions as we go along or what have you. But I have a short PowerPoint, and then I'm just going to really dive into the ISIS 1000. This is sort of what we're here to talk about, and so let's just go right into it here. So the ISIS 1000 is a brand new product that we just introduced, and it's the idea is that we're trying to go after a smaller market, and these are just some of the few people, just a few of the quotes that we've been getting about the ISIS 1000 from different customers, and Barney Piling being one who's just really in love with his ISIS 1000. He's just having a great time with it right now. So these are just a few of the quotes that we're getting. It's a brand new product, and we're going after a market that we've never really gone after before, and so far everything's been going just great. But now let's just sort of just back up a little bit about just when we're talking about, what is it about shared storage, and what do people need in the industry when it comes to shared storage, and so this is how we look at the shared storage and what it is that a media professional needs, and it's different what a media professional needs as versus what a standard sort of IT infrastructure. So the shared storage, the storage suite, that's essentially, I'm the product designer for all the shared storage, the ISIS 1000, 5500, 7500, and 2500, right? So I'm the product designer for all those products. And so this is it's part of our entire vision at Avid, and it's part of the platform. And so this is one of the things how we're expanding the platform, growing it, making it more accessible for other people to work with inside the platform. Now, so what makes Avid shared storage different than just IT storage? Like, why can't I just go out and buy a regular IT storage? Well, there's actually a shocking difference between IT storage and high bandwidth media storage. And these are some of the things these are really all the things that you're looking for. Is really multiple clients. That's usually where IT storage really falls down, when multiple clients are trying to read the same media. Have it even if you can do that, they can read one file. Once you have different, number of different files, and then really the predictability is one of the things that's most difficult. And all the Avid shared storage is extremely predictable. You can just really just do math and figure out, how much is per engine and how fast it'll go. And we essentially, we'll make sure that's what you get. And and if for some reason you're not getting that performance, we'll fix it. And generally speaking, that's not an issue we have. Avid shared storage, right? ISIS has really unmatched client count, right? The whole Media Composer bin and project sharing, and there's even like remote style workflows. It's extremely flexible, super easy to manage with the Flex Drive, which I'll show, with the ability to resize workspaces. It's very open. We have clients for a number of different platforms, as well as a file gateway if you wanted to actually connect with another another client, and it's just really the whole process is the networking is really simple. Whoops. Now we have at Avid a long heritage of storage in general. We started with the Media Dock, and we worked all the way up through Unity into ISIS. And one of the things that we did was, when we went to ISIS, is that we sort of chased our customers up, right? And we really started building more and more, higher, quality enterprise class products. And we really left sort of the market where we started in. So the introduction of the ISIS 1000 was actually to come back down. A product was actually bring all the benefits that we have in the ISIS 7500 back to a lower price point, and that's where the ISIS 1000 sits. So these are just a few of the customers that have the ISIS that are current ISIS 1000 customers. we get we have there's a number we have registered every day. We're getting, we have lots. I mean, we have over, I think the latest count is, it's almost 6,000, ISIS installs in general. So we are by far the most successful shared storage manufacturer in the media and entertainment industry. There's just no one that could even really hold a candle to us. And so these are just a few of the people that have the ISIS 1000. They're just to sort of level set everybody as to what is, when we talk about ISIS shared storage, what am I talking about? And so we have a full suite. There's all the way from the enterprise class, right, the highest, highest reliability, highest, is from the 7500 down to sort of the facility class 5500, then the 2500, and now into the ISIS 1000. So we're bringing so much of what the regular ISIS file system into this smaller package. And if you have any experience with the other ISIS products, first it'll be incredibly intuitive, and you'll see, oh, that's kind of like this, oh, that's kind of like that. And so what I took a lot of what we already had, and I used it, and I repurposed it, and I came down with this this new product called the ISIS 1000. So we just introduced it. We showed it at NAB last year, and we launched it at IBC this year, and that was just September. And so we won 2 awards at NAB, or actually we actually won the post picks at NAB, and we won 2 awards at IBC. So really great. And if there's any one thing there's a lot of shared storage vendors, and it was really great to be recognized for that. And so the ISIS 1000, we've worked with a lot of third parties, and I'll get to that in a little bit more detail later, to make sure that, and that's all part of the platform. That's really integral to what we're doing here at Avid, is making this, everything as open as we can, and just really allowing third parties. But you can have, with the ISIS 1000, you can have 24 connected clients, or actually 30 connected, 24 actually active. And that was direct feedback, frankly, from NAB. We came out with 24, and literally I came out with that number because I said, well, the switch that we're proposing people use has 24 clients, 24 connections on it. Getting a switch that's larger is a lot more expensive, and at that point you probably would move to a different product. But some of the feedback we got was that people wanted more than 24, so we said, great, we moved it up to 30. But 30 connected, 24 active. But we brought the same, I did a lot to the interface, sort of, simplify the interface, make it easier for people to use that aren't specifically have any IT background at all. ISIS shared storage, has super easy to manage just as it is, and I tried to sort of make it even better, just easier for people to work with, and again, like you have all the same power of the ISIS file system in a smaller package, and we're just we've been working with third parties. We're making sure that larger than HD, there's no problem with larger than HD playback. We really guarantee the performance per what we call media pack, which is an engine. We're guaranteed the performance per media pack, and that no matter how many clients you have, no matter how full or how empty the engine is, it's going to get the exact same performance. And that's a lot of what a lot of other shared storage does, is they'll essentially like write to the outside part of the disk, and then it's incredibly fast, and they write continuously. But as the drive start writing to the inside of the drive, it gets slower. As it starts getting fragmented, it gets slower, and that's simply not what we're doing at all. We essentially fragment the drive as much as humanly possible, so that no matter how full or how empty or how long the media's been on there, there's never a difference in performance. So reliability is really key to what we're doing here. I like to show this. I think this is one of my my favorite slides, is that because I think a lot of people just really want to see what the heck does it look like. Certainly, what does this look like, without the faceplate on it, right? So that's obviously the faceplate, and then what does it look like without the faceplate? And here you go. And so the way the engine works is there are 2 SSDs for the system drives, and they're in a RAID 1. They're mirrored, so you can lose either one, and there's no downtime at all. It can function fully on one SSD without issue at all. But that's where we have the system and the metadata and everything like that. And then we have 10 media drives, and the way that and what's important to talk about this is that they're not, that we call it a RAID 6 Plus if you want to be, if you sort of want to simplify it, but it's our own RAID. It's ours, and it's not a standard off-the-shelf RAID. And what we have 2 drive protection, and how I designed this was that you can lose obviously up to 2 drives and not lose any media, but it's media aware. So if your engine is only half full and you replace the drive, it only has to rebuild what's been used, not the entire drive. Which standard RAID, that's what it requires. It requires the rebuild of the entire drive, even if it's just a bunch of, just a bunch of ones with a bunch of noise that's nothing. You still have to build it back. And if a second drive, or in this case, a third drive was the fail, and in a RAID 6, a third drive was the fail, you're out. I mean, you're done. If something's wrong physically with that drive, and it can't read that sector, even if it's a sector of nothing, you can never rebuild the RAID, and you're done. And that's one of the things I wanted to solve with the ISIS 1000, was that I wanted to make sure that we had the most reliable. So when a drive fails, or if and when a drive fails, you only have to build what's used. And we have 2 parity. It's not an entire RAID rebuild. Normal RAIDs will actually, you lose performance during that rebuild. And the rebuild has to sort of take precedent because you don't want to lose any media. I mean, so you're losing performance while that rebuild's going on. With the ISIS 1000, I've actually de-emphasized the rebuild. I had to guarantee some, so I did. There is some rebuild, that will use I/O, but for the most part, you literally have full engine rating with a disk in rebuild. It could obviously take you a really long time to do the rebuild, but with 2 parity drives. But when you stop the rebuild, it'll go faster. When you start working, so it's great. It makes it just very, very easy, and you don't have to really simply worry about, oh, it drives down. I have to kick a bunch of people off, because I'm not going to be able to, we're not going to get the performance that I need out of this. You don't have to deal with any of that at all. You just, drive goes down, okay, replace it, let the rebuild take place, and you're done. It's very, very simple. And it's a matter of just pulling the dead drive out, putting the new drive in, and just going back to work and not having to worry about it. And it really won't affect your workflow in any way, generally. 2 power supplies, the dual power supplies. You can run on either one. I ran mine on one power supply for a long time by accident. And it's a 10 gig connection to a switch. Next slide. Okay. This is another one of my favorite slides. That's the only animation in my entire deck. You want to see it again? There you go. It's my only animation. And so what we can do is really unique in Avid Shared Storage is that we can combine engines together, and you can get the aggregate bandwidth of all the engines as if, and it's completely linear. So we're saying 300 megabytes a second per engine, and if you linearly add them up, right? So it's 3, 6, 9, 1,200 megabytes per engine, with a stack of 4. That's totally unique. As you add these engines together, you can combine the performance, and there's no issues with sort of like hotspots and where you're adding engines and doing this kind of thing. As you build the system, the performance is scales linearly, and it doesn't matter if this is completely full or completely empty. The performance is identical. So this is just some of the things we're talking about. We've worked really, really hard. I've personally worked with Adobe and with Apple and with a whole host of other companies to guarantee that to make sure that Premiere and Final Cut are just truly first-class citizens and work perfectly on the with ISIS, and we will, and I'll show some of that today. But yeah, we worked very, very hard. We do a lot of testing with both applications. It also works with Pro Tools. Obviously, Pro Tools being Avid software, we're working really hard to make sure Pro Tools is also a first-class citizen on shared storage, and we're having great results. We have a beta tester out in Vancouver that's just buying their ISIS 1000. And we officially support Pro Tools on ISIS, so it's a great workflow. This is my little partner ecosystem slide, and we're almost done with slides here. This really just shows, these are essentially, I've spoken to someone from just about every single one of these companies, and from Grass Valley to Autodesk, I mean Sony, all these different companies, so that you can use like a Chronology as an asset manager. We use Storage DNA for archive. I mean, there's a whole host of different companies that are that work perfectly, that I test, that we actively test. Either I've sent them an ISIS, they bought an ISIS, they have, whatever the case is. There's a whole host of companies that work with the ISIS 1000, and it should be no concern about does are there any issues with this working with my piece of software? I've gone out of my way to make sure it has. And this is a quote that frankly came out of nowhere. And Simon, we had been working with Adobe very closely, and it was a lot of work. There wasn't a ton on our end that we had to do to get ISIS. We had over the years have been improving performance slowly but surely with Premiere on ISIS, and then Adobe really just took the ball and ran it over the line. Like they had to make some changes to Premiere, and once they did, I mean, it's just the performance is just really outstanding. And frankly, Premiere works, as well as Media Composer, which works as well as Final Cut, which works just as well as Edius, right? So there's really, there's no specific, as far as performance goes, no piece of software is specifically advantaged over, over one another. We've really worked, we've done a lot of work to get the performance up, so that every application is pretty much an even footing. And so really, this is sort of one of my last slides here. So this is really the value, like why would you buy ISIS shared store, Avid ISIS, and we're just, it's really about reliability, and the collaboration, how you can work together, and the performance. And this is just something that you get from our, from Avid that you just simply can't get from other companies, because we just do more testing than really anybody in the industry. We have more systems out in the field, and it's it's just something that you really can't match. So that is my very quick PowerPoint presentation. So the first thing we're going to talk about here is I'm going to actually talk about how you work with the ISIS, how you manage it. And so this is my Mac, and I actually have some workspaces mounted. So to manage it, you literally just go to an IP address. Not, it's certainly not unlike it's like your home router, right? So I know it's 192.168.10.2. That's the default setting, and you get a page where you can log in. And so here's my login. And so now I'm on this page. This is where I'll log into the system and decide how what I want to do. And so it's very simple. So any computer that can get to the IP address of the engine can manage it. There's no sort of like, VPNing, or not VPN, or VNCing, no remote desktop. You don't have to do any of those kind of things. It's very, very simple. Use a browser, you get here you are. Now, the first thing we'll talk about is workspaces. So these are essentially my virtual volumes. Like I was explaining before is how I combine two engines. What I've done here is I've taken, I have two media packs. So I have these two media packs. So I have a two-engine system, and I've combined them into a single storage group. So if you look at this, there's two engines in one storage group. And so by combining those two engines into one storage group, there's no boundaries as to what kind of workspace I can make. So if I say I want to make a workspace, I can make a new workspace, and it can essentially be, as large as I want. So if I wanted to take this workspace here and drag it out, I'm using more than the storage of one single engine, right? This is a 20 terabyte workspace I've just created. So it's larger than the single engine. So it's spanning over two engines. So that's one of the real unique features of ISIS, is that ability to create workspaces across engines as you're, right? It's spanning across two engines. So if I make a new workspace, obviously I have to give it a name. You do have to give it a name. An unnamed workspace is not good. This is in my storage group, which is another thing that you can do, is that you may not want to have you might want to have two different storage groups, and by doing that, you segregated out people that are working. So you can have the offline editors on one storage group, the online editors on another, and that's one of the ways that you can sort of say, well, I'd never want those people, the work that the offline editors are doing, to ever impact the online editors. I mean, there's a lot of ways to sort of do this. So I'm in that storage group. I'm going to just default to 200. This is a really nice thing, is that I can say, what, when I have less than 10 gig left, or I'm 90% full, warn me. And so as I create that workspace, it'll actually give me a warning that I've crossed the line, and I'll get a warning, and then I'll know to actually increase the storage before I've run out of space, and before it's sort of like I'm in the middle of doing something and now I'm out of space. So it makes it very easy. At this very moment, when I'm creating the workspace, I can decide who gets access to it. I can say, well, everyone who's an editor, right, there's a different group, and I'll talk about that in a second, has access to it. But I'll say, you know what, well, I want to give myself access to it. I'll give myself read and write. Tony, who's my assistant editor, he gets a read only. And then the assistant editor is a general guy. I'm going to give him read. The freelancer, he doesn't have any access. He doesn't need it. Same with the intern, no access to it. Just Bob, that's me again. I'll get read and write. And so the editors, right, the group, I can say, well, everyone who's in an editor group gets read and write, and hit apply. And so now I've created this workspace called Bob Made This, and I've given specific permissions to that workspace to people. Now, for example, there's Tony. Well, I only gave Tony read access to it, but because Tony is a member of the editors group, you can see his effective position is read and write. So very quickly you can say, oh, Tony's an editor. Boom, one click, and every workspace that you have in your system that you've set up, they'll get that permission. So it's very, very powerful ability to do that, is how you can manage permissions on the workspace. So on a workspace by workspace level, you would manage these permissions. You can have up to 1,024 workspaces, right? That's a lot. We have some of our, we don't even have some of our largest customers never get even close to that, but up to 1,024 workspaces, and you can resize the workspaces as many times as you want. I can just continually resize this while I/O is going on, right? So there's no issue. People can be working, and gosh, I've done this a lot. In my background as an editor, as I'd be working along, and I'd look at like the capture tool when I was doing like baseband capture, and I could see that I was running out of storage. You just log in, and you can drag it out and add more storage to the workspace, right? Really unique. There's a lot of shared storage says, oh yeah, we can resize. Well, yeah, they can resize, but they're limited. There's a limited number of sizes. You can only resize, there's like a number, like 1,000 times or something like that. You can only have that number of resizes. With ISIS, that is one of the things you should just resize to your heart's content and make as many, up to 1,024, workspaces you want. So you just simply make a workspace for everything. It's like, workspace for graphics, right? So you put all your graphics for a specific episode on that workspace. And then you can make it read-only, right? So you say, well, I never want the freelancer to delete anything. The graphics are for the show. The freelancer's coming in. That's great. He's going to be putting graphics onto my program. I never want him deleting those graphics, which is fine. They have read access to the graphics. No problem. Can use it in a series. Can never even accidentally, because no one will delete something on purpose, right? Delete the graphics. So the same thing with the music, right? So you should make a workspace for all these things and segregate them out, and only people who have access to them actually get to see the workspace. So it's not like you sort of have a big volume and then you have folders and you're sort of trying to manage permissions on folders. We certainly have customers that will make one gigantic workspace and then do it that way, but they just make folders. The idea though is with ISIS is that you would actually make workspaces, and so your workspaces become your folders in a way, and that's how you sort of manage it. But workspaces are your sort of asset manager 101. This is how you're going to manage assets. You just make sure that a specific project, whatever project that is, right? So if I'm working on episode 101, I just make sure all my media goes on to episode 101, and then when that's done, so say now the show's gone off for review, I can zero it out. So now I've just clawed back all the storage, right? So that workspace was 75 gig now. I can say, nope, it's gone. It's only 2 gig. I'm only using 2 gig, and I've clawed back all that extra space, and I'm able to use it for other projects. So it's really powerful, especially in schools. You have a graduating senior. You don't want to delete their media after they graduated. Let them come in, after the graduation parties. So you just zero it out. Then you say, come on in, copy your media off to your drive, and you can move along. And that's a really nice way, but then keep that storage, you can keep that. And same thing like at schools, you can say, well, I have, as I have groups, right? So let's move on to the next thing. We'll go to users. And so users, we have an LDAP sync. So if you're using LDAP, you can actually sync this every day, and all the users can come in, and it'll check against your LDAP. And so when I create a user, and one of the nice things here is that, so we create a user, got to give it a name. and a password, what I can do is I can actually limit the bandwidth that a user can use. So on a user by user level, I can limit the bandwidth that specific person uses. So I can say they get 10 megabytes a second, no matter what they're doing, they have 10 megabytes a second. They can't go over it. So no matter what computer they're sitting at, however they're logging in, they get 10 megabytes a second. You can also say, well, they can or can't resize it. Well, what's nice about the resize is it actually gives you the ability to, it's kind of like a sub-administrator. Frankly, it is a sub-administrator. So you could give someone the ability to resize or not resize. And so in this respect, if they have no ability to resize and limit them, they log in and they can only see whatever workspaces you're giving them access to. So I'm going to say, well, I guess read to that, read and write to that, read to that, right? Very quickly, you can give this specific user read and write access to certain workspaces and limit the bandwidth so they can't simply just overload this, right? Most shared storage, I mean, the most shared storage, the way it works is that you have to go to the NIC or the fiber channel card and limit the bandwidth there, which is really a clunky, very difficult way to do it. You can just do this on a user by user level, and you can do it while they're working, which is kind of cool too, is that you can actually hit the bandwidth and knock the bandwidth down while they're actually doing something. Then I mentioned groups earlier. So I made groups, right? And so here's a group called editors, and I made people members of it. And then the editors group has these rights. The freelancers group has these rights. They can only do this. And so a person a user can be a part of 2 different groups. So they have 2 different sets. So as you're working along, this is great for a school situation where where you say, okay, everyone who's taken the 101 class has read and write, to this workspace, but only read to these. So you can just sort of creep them along and just keep adding them to different groups and removing them from groups, and then they no longer have access to it. This is bandwidth limits. So this is where I could come in and I could actually limit the bandwidth based on the device. So not the user, so I can do it both ways. I can say, well, whoever sits at that computer can never have more bandwidth than whatever it is I'm specifically talking about. So you can say 10 megabytes or whatever, 20, 50, and you can knock down the performance of that specific computer. So you may have someone connected to the ISIS 1000 via 10 gig, but that's just because you have 10 gig wiring or whatever, you have a 10 gig NIC. You never specifically want them to use all 10 gig. So you can just knock it down to essentially the bandwidth of like a 2x1, and that's all they'll be able to use. So that's a very unique feature, is the ability to do with the bandwidth. The other nice thing is that all the installers, everything you need to set up ISIS is right here. So if for some reason you're on a computer, it's brand new, fresh out of the box, it's everything you need. You just literally go to the IP address, you get the client, you get everything you need, and you're up and running. And it makes it very, very simple to get this all working really quickly. I talked real quickly. Here's engines, right? So I have 2 different engines on my system. One of them is running as system director, one isn't. I've combined those engines. So in the engines there's a media pack, and each engine has 1 media pack, and then I've combined them into a storage group. I can see my all the clients that are connected. This is all the computers that are connected to my to my ISIS right now, and then my client bandwidth. I can see how much bandwidth anyone's using. Unfortunately, I didn't set anything up to use bandwidth, but I'll show that in a second. And so that's, there's a lot more to talk about this, but that is the management console, and that's how you manage your ISIS. It's very, very powerful, very, very flexible. So let's log out, and I'm as the administrator now, and I'm going to log in as Tony. And so now as Tony logs in, right, so Tony has no access to resize workspaces. So he could log in, but all he has is the installers, and in the system status history, I can see if, what's going on in the system. So this is like a regular user. Then if I log out, I log in as Bob Russo. This is different. I have the ability to work on workspaces. So any workspace that I have access to, that I have read and write to, I can resize, but I can't delete them or anything, right? I can't kill the workspace, but I can come in and I could change the workspace size. This is great for the assistant editor that's working overnights or whatever, the lab assistant. You give them ability to resize workspaces so that if someone's running out of storage, you can, keep them along. You don't have to be an administrator. So it's really nice. It's a sub-administrator account, which is a great ability to have that ability. And then I go back in as administrator. All right. So the other thing we'll talk about here is actually the system status history, which and this will give you every 3 seconds, and you can come over here and actually click on these lights. So if I'm here and you see like the red light go on, you can click on that and say, oh boy, what was the red light for? And so it'll actually give you every minute for 3 days. You can have this status and say, go right here and say, what was, oh, no connection, I was unbound, right? This is actually probably when I was building the system. And if I go here and here, right, I can see what was going on at any given time. And so now it's telling me like the power supply is missing. I can also see the bandwidth now. So let me see. It's not going to remember anything, right? So you can see how much bandwidth anyone was using at any moment in time. And so so if someone says, oh, last night I was using it and there was no, whatever, the performance is really poor, and you can say, well, I know why, you had too many people using it at the same time. So you can actually see for 3 days how much bandwidth is being used and who's using the bandwidth. And so that would be the end of the management console. So there's a question, is there a limit to the number of users you can set up? So so the number of users, you can have 30 connected, so you can put the client on as many computers as you want. And only but only 30 people will be connected at a time. So you have 30 connected clients. 24 is what we technically support for active, and that is truly out of just the cost of the switch, right? It's just that there's at that point to get a switch that actually has more than 30, the price starts bumping up, and that's really where I came to that. Is that we figured 24 for the ISO 1000 is a lot of clients at the same time. Okay, so now let's talk about the client manager. So now here's the client manager. This is how I mount workspaces on the ISOs, and here it is. So here's the client manager itself. And so some of the things we can do is, and let me just set this up real quick here. And this is a path diag. This is just a simple utility we have, and so I'm going to kick this off. So this is the client. This is how I mount and unmount. So you can see I just made this workspace right here called Bob Made This. And it's not mounted because it didn't exist until I just made it, but I have the ability to mount it. So I can double click on it and it mounts. And if you look down here, there it is, it's mounted. I can actually right click, unmount, and then it goes away. And very quickly I can mount and unmount the workspace. So it's super simple to mount and unmount them, to mount workspaces. If I right click, I can enable auto mount, which means you see that little like recycling, a folder with a little recycle arrows on it. And that tells me that every time I log in, that me, the administrator in this account logs in, that workspace is going to automatically mount. So it makes it very simple. So you could preset this up for somebody and say, okay, this user has this. I'm going to make sure every time that these workspaces mount, and they really don't have to think about it. And then to that point, once it's here, right, there's nothing specific about it. If I go to, let me see, if I just open it up here, right? I mean, there it is. I mean, it's just a volume that you can do anything with. I mean, it just looks like a computer. It just looks like a network attached drive to the computer. So what I've done here is so in my computer here, whoops, that's not supposed to be checked. In my computer here, I have 3 network connections, right? So this one right here, this is a USB connector that I'm using to connect to the internet. Right? This is a MacBook Pro. So this is actually a 2-year-old MacBook Pro that I'm demoing on. So I have one USB Ethernet. That's actually how you're seeing my screen right now. But then I have 2 Ethernet connections to the ISIS. And so something that's really unique with Media Composer, with ISIS, I should say, is the ability to, you can essentially double the bandwidth by connecting, by running 2 1 gig Ethernet. And so you see right here, I'm getting 208 megabytes a second because I'm connected 2 by 1. And so if I go to I have another Mac over here, and let me hide Media Composer real quick. And then if I look at, and so here's another Mac with the same workspaces mounted essentially at the same time. And so, and if I go to my path diag, so I can set this up here. And so this will actually, I'll get about, you know, a little over 100 megabytes a second at this, you know, doing, you know, with this, because this one's connected via single gig E. I gotta make sure I, and so I'll kick that off. Now, if I look at my ISIS console, my management console, if I take a look at this, I can see what's going on, that the bandwidth that's happening on my system. And so here's my my client bandwidth. So I can see the bandwidth that each specific user is using at the time, right? And and what kind of performance they're getting. I can see what's going on with them, right? So here's my MacBook Pro getting about 102, and then if I kick my guy back off, I can see when mine starts picking up, I can see the bandwidth that my computer will start using. And so here's mine kicking off. It's 171, right? And so there. And so here we go, right? So 187. So as it starts ramping up, this is 204 there, right? So you can see that I can see what's going on. You know, this is the aggregate. This is what the entire stack is doing. So I have two computers, and that's the performance I'm getting out of it. And that's great because of, you know, my system status history, I'll see that the entire time. Oops, and I have this running twice. All right, so the next thing we'll just go over real quick is we'll talk about sort of collaborative projects on ISIS. So the first thing we'll talk about is, well, actually, let's go here first. So the first thing we'll talk about before we get to the collaborative projects is that I put all the ISIS 1000 is, so here's our page for the ISIS 1000. We have a setup of the ISIS 1000 simply could not be easier, and I've really worked very, very hard to that end. And so I actually have a quick start video on how to set up the ISIS, and we go through every single step, completely free, just right on the website. So if you have any questions on how to, you know, how to set it up, we have a video. I also have let's see, oops, wrong guy. Here's my ISIS 1000. So if I go to, so we go to Avid ISIS, you know, avid.com ISIS 1000 quick start, and then when you buy an ISIS 1000, there's actually a sheet of paper in there that tells you how to go here, and there's a QR code and everything. All the documentation is in one place, very, very easy to find, and here's the video link to it. We just came out with a firmware fix for fan speed. That the fans were spinning a little too loud, so we just came out with that recently, maybe today. So we have a fan speed fix. So the ISIS 1000 is actually quieter than the switch. The switches are louder than the ISIS 1000. It's actually really kind of hysterical to turn the ISIS on, and then you're like, man, the switch is so loud. So the ISIS 1000 is really, really quiet. I'm sitting in a room right now with two of them, simply right next to me. They're really quiet, especially specifically with this new firmware. But all the documentation's here. Everything's available, right? We have the quick start video. We have our quick start, you know, guide here. Here's the quick start guide that goes through how to set up the ISIS. It is really designed so that you can do this on your own. That you don't specifically need to have. It's not super technical, right? And that's what I'm trying to do. That's what I really what I was trying to accomplish with the ISIS 1000. And here's just, you know, all my documentation is all available. Makes it really, really easy. I mean, a lot of the shared storage is I find it near impossible to get any documentation. All mine's readily available. Let's talk about, gotta move this guy out of the way. All right, so Final Cut fully supported on the ISIS 1000. We test with it actively, and so all this media is actually on the ISIS 1000. If I wanted to work on media from another project, one of the things, so if I want to connect the media, I go File, Import Media, and I'm going to go to my workspace, and so here all my workspaces are showing up, and let's go to my episode 101, right? Here's my motorcycle, and I select those, and then just import them, and there they are. There's my motorcycle shots, and I can, drag and drop them. Sometimes I understand how to do this. I can drag and drop them and use them in my timeline, no problem at all. I can work with it. So that's it. It works great, fully supported with Final Cut Pro. If I want to use another, if I want it, so the thing is that Final Cut doesn't actually allow for any, what is it called? They're called not project, they're called libraries. It doesn't allow two users have the same library open at the same time. It actually just crashes Final Cut, which is fine. Is the way to work with this is you actually duplicate the projects. And so what I've done here is you can go here. Here's my Apple projects. Here's my Final Cut. I want to open up this Final Cut Pro B project, which is over on this computer right here. So I have this computer with my project B on here. And what I want to do is and that has all motorcycle shots. And what I want to do is I want to get some of the media from there because it's been logged and I want to use it. So that's no problem. What I'll do is I'll come over here, I'll take that and I'll duplicate it. And then I'll just add my name to it. And so I duplicate it. That's great. I come back to my local computer. And I want to go Open Library. I'm going to go Other. I'm going to say Locate. And then here's my B, Bob. So I open that. And so when I can open up that library inside of my Final Cut. And it's not beach balling here. And then I could now have that entire library in my project. And that's essentially project sharing. With Final Cut is to open up libraries in that manner. There it is. Thank you. So here's my my other project, and project B. Here's my project B, right? And now I have all these motorcycle shots, and I want to use them into my helicopter project. And so I can just take one of those motorcycle shots and drag it into my helicopter shot project. And so that's the Final Cut, project sharing, is to duplicate the projects. It works really well. I can do some of the things that are really important is the ability to consolidate the media. So if I wanted to consolidate the media in here, I can actually consolidate the media, and it makes what's called hard links. And that's another thing you can do, is so you're not sort of living in some other project, you actually consolidate the media. So that's the Final Cut Pro project sharing. But there's no issue. If you notice, I'm going to have the same group of QuickTime files opened by 3 different NLEs at the same time, on using ISIS 1000. Here's my Premiere Pro, and so I did the same thing over here. I have Premiere Pro running. So Premiere I have a project here called Project B, right? And this has all helicopter shots in it. And then this one has all my motorcycle shots, but I'm in this project, and I need to get some media out of that other project. So in Premiere, you would go here, and I would go to my projects window, and I would go to my Adobe projects, and I'd go to Project B, and I'd open it up, and then I could see all the clips inside that project, even the sequence. So if I want this clip, that's great. I can take that clip, and I could just drag and drop it. And now I've imported it, essentially at that moment, I've imported the clip in here. So this is pretty cool, right? Totally supported, works great. I want these projects into my, and just by storing 2 projects on ISIS at the same time, you can navigate using the media browser, and you could do this type of project sharing. And so this, works really well, and it's fully supported on ISIS. And that's how you do it. But Adobe does not allow two users to have the same project open at the same time. So you can be in your own project, but then navigate to the other project. So, you know, works great, and Premiere is absolutely fully supported on on ISIS. And I don't need to save it. All right. So the last thing we'll do is, and get out of there. The last thing we'll do is we'll talk about Media Composer. And so what I've done now is I, of course, have Media Composer. I have it right here. There's my Media Composer. And same thing on the other computer. I have Media Composer running. But what I have unique here is that I'm in this project called Helicopter and Motorcycle Project. So the same project called Helicopter and Motorcycle. And so over here I have the motorcycle clips bin open, and I have a green lock, and that means I have read and write access to it. So my MacBook Pro 17 here has read and write access to that clip, and I can use it, and that's great. But if I need, I'm over here I'm in the same project. So I have two computers with the same project open. With the ISIS 1000, let's say you can have 24 users with the same project open at the same time. There's really no limit, just the limit of connect user. But I want to get that. I need some clips out of that motorcycle bin, but I can see it's opened by my MacBook Pro. But that's okay. I can open it up. I can double-click on the clip, and there it is. No sweat, and there's no I'm not copying anything. I'm not I can take it, drag and drop it, and use it in my sequence without any issues at all, right? And so now I've just used that motorcycle shot in my project, right? So if I want a helicopter clips, right, I can use that as well. There's no issues at all taking that clip and dropping it into my sequence. And it's the same thing. So if I take so I have this segment 1 open, right? So let me link to some media file. Oops, no one's looking at this. No, I can't do it over here. Pay no attention to what you just saw. If I go File, link to Media, and then I pick some shots here, click Open. So even if I just take a look at this clip right here and I want to change it to the motorcycle clips, I want to change it to Bob. And so now let me save it. And then if I go back here to motorcycle clips, so I don't have access to it, right? Motorcycle clips, just open it back up because I don't have read and write to it. I now change that clip to Bob. So one user can just go in and so you could essentially be the editor and only have read access to bins, but you can have an assistant editor who's importing media, capturing it, or whatever the case is, adding metadata, and as they add metadata, it updates in the bin, right? It's really powerful, right? So if I go to motorcycle clips here again, whoops, that's what I wanted to do. Motorcycle clips, open it up, there it is, it's Bob over here. Whoops. And so now the clip is now called Bob. So it's really, really powerful way to do collaboration, and obviously completely and fully supported on ISIS. And ultimately, that's it. That's about 50 minutes. So if there's any specific questions, I'm more than happy to jump to it. The one thing I didn't show was actually the Windows client. We do have a Windows client. And this is actually a VM. This is the easiest way I can do it. Is I have a Windows client, and we fully support. Honestly, frankly, we obviously support Windows. We fully support VMware images in VMware as we test. And so if I'm going to log in now, instead of logging in there, I'll log in as Tony, and I'll log in, and you'll see I don't have all the same number. I don't have the same number of workspaces. I don't have quite as many because Tony doesn't have access to all the different workspaces that the administrator or Bob Russo or whatever. So depending on your user rights, limits the amount of workspaces. What's nice about Windows, right, I can obviously double-click on it, and then the workspace mounts. If I right-click, I can assign a mount point. So I can say, well, I want this always to assign a mount point. I want this always to go on letter, a specific letter. I say I always want this to be R, and hit check, right? Now that workspace is mounted as R. If I unmount and then mount it again, it always comes back as R, which is really nice, which is really important, sort of file-based media, how you have to deal with, on Windows, you have to deal with those UNC paths and things changing. That's one of the things you can do. I can obviously enable auto mount the same way as everything else. When I assign a mount point, I can actually do a UNC path. There's some applications that really require a UNC path, so obviously I can do that. Media Composer is not one of them. And so that's sort of how you can mount and unmount workspaces with ISIS. If I want to get to the management console, it's the same on both Mac and Windows. If I'm just sitting here, I don't specifically remember the IP address of it, and you click what I call it the man button, and as the product designer, I guess I decide what it's called. So it's called the man button, which is that button right here, which I sort of feel like it's a guy standing with his arms up. And you click the man button, and that'll get you to the ISIS management console. So it's same thing on Windows. Just click the man button, it launches the default browser, and you get to the management console. And so, any specific questions? I haven't seen any extra ones come up.
Hey Bob, we got a live question for the phone on the phone here for you.
Hey Bob, how much usable storage do you get with the RAID 6 if it's a 20 terabyte system?
Right. So you get so it's not really a RAID 6, right? So it's our own RAID 6. There's 2 parity drives. So you get this is one of the things that as a product designer that is we count in which I think if you talk to if you talk to an engineer, a storage engineer, you shouldn't be counting in terabytes. You shouldn't be counting in 1024 because that's not real. You don't get 1024 ever. You get 1000 based. So we honestly count in 1000 based, which nobody else in the industry is counting in 1000 based. So we count in TIB. I'm actually trying to change that. So we count in terabytes instead of, I think it's terabytes. It's TIB. But to answer your question is, all the calculations you see in here are done in TIB, 1000 base, not 1024. Seemingly the rest of the entire industry is counting in terabytes, which is cheating because you don't really get that much storage. But you get, I think it's like 14.75 terabytes TIB. It comes to 15.7 terabytes. So if you're going to compare apples to apples, because it's not really a 20 terabyte, because I mean, I guess technically it is a 20 terabyte, but it's not. You don't have 20 terabytes of usable storage on anybody's storage because you can't count. You don't format it that way. So to answer your question, to compare it to to competitors, 15.7 usable terabytes. Does that answer your question? So that's what you get. That's what's usable on the ISIS. I am trying to change that from terabytes to terabytes, so that we're on even playing field. So Ed,
great. Thanks, Bob.
Yeah. So that's it's just one of those things. It's the right way to do it, but it's not the way anybody else in the industry is doing it. So I'm going to change it so it says terabytes, so it makes sense. So for if you don't understand that, then you say, oh man, I have so much less storage on ISIS than I do on whatever XYZ storage, and it's not exactly the same thing. So Ed has a question from Ed. Do you have to reboot the ISIS when you replace a drive? You absolutely do not have to reboot any drive, be it a system drive or a media drive, while the system's running. And honestly, it's even better to not replace the drive. While the system is running, it's looking for unplug event. One of the things I was really I wanted to do, and one of the things I did was, what a really, really common thing, and it's surprisingly common, is people pulling the wrong drive. And that happens all the time. It's really surprising. I guess maybe, from where I sit, it seems surprising. But you have a bad drive in your RAID, and you're like, that's the bad drive. And you go and you grab it and you yank it out. You've now pulled the wrong drive out, and you're done. Game's over. You can't rebuild it. Once you pull a drive out on a standard RAID 5, you're out of business. So with the ISIS 1000, what I did was I actually made it so that we wait 5 minutes. I'm almost positive that's the number. But we waited determined, there's a number of time, and I'm almost positive it's 5 minutes. That's what we figured it would take that long for someone to figure out they pulled the wrong drive out. You can put the drive back in, and no one has to know that you pulled the wrong drive. We'll just accept it back into the engine. We won't, we won't knock it as a bad drive or anything like that. Because in a RAID 5, you pull the wrong in a RAID 5 or a traditional RAID 5 or RAID 6, you pull the wrong drive out. It doesn't matter if you just turn the power off for a split second. That is now a different disk, and is now going to go into rebuild, and you have to rebuild the whole thing. If you've lost 2 drives in a RAID 5, you're done. I mean, this is like format and start over again. There's no way. It's very, very difficult without some very serious trickery to get that drive to be accepted back into the RAID. But that's one of the things I did in the 1000 was to make sure that if someone pulled the wrong drive, there's a grace period that they can put that drive in. After 5 minutes, the engine's going to assume that that drive is gone and it's not coming back, and it's going to want another drive to replace it. But again, we're only rebuilding what's used, not the entire engine, not the entire drive.
Great, excellent answer there. Well, Bob, I think that's gonna do it for us here. I mean, what a fantastic session this afternoon. Really unique viewpoint that you bring to the conversation here, just due to your experience with the product. And I think this was a really fantastic overview and helpful. In order to help those who were on the call, and even those who couldn't make it, we have a recorded version of this that we're going to be able to send out. And again, that will wrap things up for iVideo and Avid here on this really fantastic afternoon session.
Right. Thank you, everyone, for all your time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.